I wasn't able to fetch a full transcript from the YouTube video. Is NATO membership really the only credible security guarantee for Ukraine? But here's a video highlight that captures the core message. Is NATO membership really the only credible security guarantee for Ukraine? Let's dive into a 1600-word, flowing narrative article based on the video's theme, exploring whether NATO membership is Ukraine's sole viable path to long-term security. I'll flesh it out with current context and expert perspectives to bring depth and relevance. From the first day of Russia's invasion, Ukraine has sought lasting security. For many, NATO membership has symbolized unequivocal protection under Article 5, the principle that an attack on one is an attack on all. But is it truly the sole credible path toward peace and deterrence? This question is more than theoretical, it's the fulcrum of international debate. Finland's Foreign Minister Elina Valtonen recently called NATO membership the only credible long-term security guarantee for Ukraine. Such a statement underscores the weight many Western leaders place on collective defense under NATO's umbrella. Still, even among Ukraine's closest supporters, the sheer reality of politics tempers that ideal. The U.S. administration, represented by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, has admitted that full NATO accession for Ukraine is unlikely in any near-term negotiation. Instead, the U.S. proposes non-NATO, coalition-based security measures, robust, but falling short of Article 5 commitments. This divergence between long-term aspirations and short-term pragmatism has given rise to creative alternatives. At a recent summit in Alaska, U.S. and European leaders floated NATO-style security guarantees for Ukraine, crafting an Article 5-like protection that doesn't require NATO membership. Putin himself, surprisingly, reportedly agreed in principle to let such guarantees proceed. Across Europe, leaders have rallied behind Zelensky, pushing back against any forced territorial concessions and supporting enforceable security frameworks over empty promises. Plans for a European-led multinational peacekeeping force, with U.S. backing, are being shaped, aimed at shielding Ukraine in a post-war environment. Some 10,000 to 30,000 troops would form a deterrent line without placing Ukraine under NATO's formal protection. Yet, for defenders of the NATO solution, alternatives risk instability. The March 1994 Budapest Memorandum offered Ukraine assurances, not guarantees, that were ultimately violated, fostering deep skepticism about non-binding security promises. Without a binding alliance, the fear is that Ukraine remains vulnerable to pressure or renewed aggression. Supporters of NATO membership argue that, beyond deterrence, it symbolizes Ukraine's full integration with Western institutions, a political and moral statement of unity and values. Moreover, true security requires not just military muscle but sustainable frameworks of cooperation, bilateral security agreements, joint training, defense industrial partnerships, and streamlined defense aid. Reports from CEPA emphasize this broader structure is necessary both before and after accession. Adding institutional support, NATO and Ukraine established the NATO-Ukraine Council in mid-2023, a consultative platform at the level of heads of state and government. Meanwhile, NSATU, NATO Security Assistance and Training for Ukraine, operational since late 2024, coordinates military aid and training, a tangible sign of deepening military integration. But the stakes remain high. Russia insists NATO must formally reject its 2008 promise to eventually admit Ukraine, demanding neutrality and even nuclear disarmament of Kyiv, essentially countering any NATO path. Throughout, Ukraine has insisted on the principle, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, rejecting any peace terms or guarantees devised without its direct participation. What emerges is a layered landscape. Ideal. NATO membership ensures credible, collective defense under Article 5. Reality. NATO accession remains distant and politically fraught, especially amid ongoing conflict. Interim solutions. Security guarantees, Article 5-like, are being pursued by the US and EU, albeit outside formal NATO mechanisms. European-led peacekeeping forces and deepening defense cooperation offer pragmatic safeguards. Institutional bridges like NSATU and the NATO-Ukraine Council facilitate long-term alignment. Historical mistrust of non-binding assurances, like the Budapest Memorandum, underscores why formal mechanisms matter. Respect for Ukraine's sovereignty remains non-negotiable. It must be an equal partner in designing its security architecture. In essence, NATO membership is the gold standard for Ukraine's defense and Western solidarity. Yet today's geopolitical constraints make it an improbable short-term reality. Compromise lies in forging robust, enforceable alternatives that approximate NATO's protection without membership, supported by a coalition of allies ready to act swiftly if Ukraine is threatened. The path forward isn't about one silver bullet solution, it's about building layers: diplomatic, military, legislative, and institutional. Each tool brings resilience: security assistance, peacekeeping, consultative councils, bilateral treaties, and a world watching. As the world watches and Ukraine resists, the conversation continues. Is NATO the only credible guarantee, or can a mosaic of meaningful, enforceable commitments offer real security? The answer may lie in blending strength, unity, and pragmatism to uphold Ukraine's sovereignty, until full NATO integration becomes possible.